So thank you. Welcome everybody on a wet, soggy day in the Norfolk Record Office. And those online as well, welcome. Can I ask you just for a minute to ground yourself, make sure that you're seated comfortably in your chair and acknowledging the support that the chair is offering you. And just to take a few moments to think about your breathing. How quickly, how shallow, how deeply you are breathing. And how often do we forget that our breath keeps us going, keeps us alive, but also impacts our nervous system? So when we're agitated or anxious, our breathing tends to get shallower. And when we're relaxed, our breathing can be deeper and longer breaths, slower breaths. So one of the practices I am trying to do on a daily basis is self-care. And one of the ways to connect inwardly is just to pay attention to your breathing. And there's an exercise that you can do if you can't sleep, if you're in a meeting almost and feeling yourself getting agitated. It's called square breathing. And you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and you hold for 4. And you can just trace that sort of square pattern on your leg to keep you conscious of that pattern. And just by doing so will affect your vasovagal nerves. Isn't that incredible? That our breath and how we engage with our bodies can affect our mental well-being. So my talk today is a very broad remit, and there's so much expertise in this room. So I hope we can have time for a conversation and questions at the end. So what does creativity contribute to mental well-being? When we're thinking about health, our heritage, the cultures within which we live and work, and place. Place being our physical place and position, but also the environments within which we interact. So I currently run the Norfolk Initiative for Coastal and Rural Health Equalities at UEA. And we bid for and won funding to consider how you can engage in communities to think about the well-being of communities in where we live and work. So a lot of our work is to do with health and social care, workforce well-being, but we've also worked with voluntary organizations, charities, etc., to see how we are sustaining communities of compassion where people can live and interact and engage well together where they live, where they work. So my first question, what makes for a good life? We've heard a little bit from Chris about how he's crisis almost in his diagnosis and things that were happening in his life have enabled him to take stock and rethink about what is a fulfilling life for him. And what makes a good life for you? Sometimes I get peopled out. I work with people, I live with people, and sometimes I don't want to interact with people when it comes to, the end of a hectic week or something, or you've been busy weekend and then you're back at work. And sometimes I want some peace and quiet. But largely, my personality, being slightly on the extrovert scale, means I feed off my social interactions. I like being with people, and we are largely social beings. So how do we know we've got the right connections and we're spending time with people who share the same values as us, share the same principles, share the same hobbies, interests, passions? And as Chris said again, are you sleeping adequately? Do you keep yourself hydrated? Do you eat the right foods? And it always fascinates me that if we eat seasonal vegetables and fruit, that gives our bodies exactly the right minerals and vitamins required for a healthy, functioning brain and physiology. And yet today we've got the option, haven't we, of having strawberries literally 12 months of the year. But you've probably noticed those strawberries don't always taste as good and as rich and as succulent as our good old Norfolk strawberries in the summer seasons. You can't beat them, can you? Kent might disagree with me, but hey, we're in Norfolk. So what makes a good life for you? And again, this will change over time. As you're younger, people are seeking education, seeking a career, seeking identity. And then as we move to latter part of our lives, where my career is now coming to an end, what does life offer me beyond hard working that I've been brought up with? So what makes for a good life? For me, I think it's about where and how do we make those meaningful connections. I was at a meal the other night, and you look around the room and some people are on date night or whatever, and yet they're on their phones. You're on the bus and you see, and I observe, I love people watching. I observe parents interacting with their kids, and if they're annoying them, they will give them their phone. So where and how do you make meaningful connections? When do you engage all your five senses in your day-to-day activities? Like I said, we forget to acknowledge our breath as an important indicator of our well-being. When do we think about what we're tasting, smelling, hearing? Gary and I were talking about music and how important music can be in our lives and our moods. Sometimes I want loud, vibrant movement and music, sorry, if I'm having to hoover. Or I will want more reflective music if I just, again, like I said, at the end of the day, want to chill a bit. So where and how do you make meaningful connections? What do we mean? Health, heritage, culture, and place. So I've got just some definitions here that may resonate with you, or you may have other definitions that you use and think about. So in terms of health and creativity, creativity is such a broad word, isn't it? It can mean many, many things. And one of the areas I've got more and more interested in my professional career is the use of left and right side of the brain. So in healthcare, we're often taught to go through logical, sequential decision making to get to a solution. So if someone's representing these symptoms, we immediately go for a diagnosis that will lead to a treatment pathway. But actually, what I've learned is if we engage in some creative exploration and engage in a shared decision-making process, understanding the person and what their preference is, you often find a pathway that may go against a conventional medical intervention, and you need to create something that's far more person-centered for that individual. So engaging in creativity in the education field has been something that I've explored. And also with my background in mental health, how the use of what they call asylum art over the years has been seen as a therapy for people. And what do those art express and expose that language often cannot? So creativity is a very broad aspect of practice. Likewise, heritage. Where do we come from? The Change Minds project is a beautiful example of how do we trace our ancestry and understand what's happened in our past and how that influences us. So again, in healthcare, we're recognizing genetic markers are often laid down by our grandparents that will manifest themselves in health or illness in future generations. Culture. What do we mean by culture? Again, for me, I work with health and social care staff thinking about their workplace culture. What happens around here and why do we make the decisions we do? Are we allowed to use our creativity in healthcare when you want to create a pathway for someone that's based around their needs rather than what's prescribed by someone else? So one definition of culture is, well, this is how things are done around here. So we have a project at the moment called the THEO project, Therapeutic Optimization, where on 2 older persons units, we have provided a nursing uplift, so nursing expertise to work alongside clinicians to think about how do you deliver care in a way that's far more person-centered, relational, interactive, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional even. And in the THEO project, what we're finding is that people are enjoying the critical inquiry of what they're doing and being given space to think rather than just react. So again, we've noticed that just by walking alongside somebody, not necessarily telling them what to do, but allowing them to explore their place, their values, their beliefs, their intentions, they're having far more purposeful engagement between nurses and patients, for example, but also between the staff themselves. So one example we had when we first started on the ward, often staff work 12 hours. And someone said, you're the first person that's spoken to me for a week. I've been on shift and I've not spoken to anyone. Isn't that tragic? So not only are we withdrawing behind the screens again and the digital technology that perhaps distracts us and moves us even further away from having meaningful relationships with the people we're caring for. Place, we hear a lot about place-based activities at the moment, and place is so important in understanding the context within which we live and work. But place means more than that. It can mean a state of mental well-being. And then health. So when I started nursing back in Florence Nightingale's day, the head wasn't necessarily on the body. It was seen as a very separate entity. Today, we are beginning to think that the mind and the body coexist. Far more are we understanding how chronic pain can cause mental health issues. And vice versa, mental health issues can cause physical reactions and responses. So it's this holistic view that perhaps is what we need to reconsider if we want sustainable health and well-being. How do we connect and understand the world within which we live and the people that we live and interact with? So what is mental well-being? The World Health Organization says it's a state of emotional, psychosocial wellness that allows people to live and function to their full potential. So I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I've ever reached my full potential. There's more to come. And like we've said, we change with the seasons, with the people we're working with the environments we're in, with life events. Our mental health changes. So my question is, how do we understand ourselves and how do we understand the world within which we live and engage? So this has been a question posed for many, many years. Indigenous cultures have tried to teach communities their earth wisdom through storytelling and images. My grandmother was a marvelous cook and a gardener, and she enlightened me to the fact that recipe books were often women sharing the recipes from natural remedies for health. And then they became cookbooks over time. That changed. But initially, recipe books were women sharing their knowledge of natural remedies. All religions are helping us to strive for an enlightened existence. And there's many, many texts that try to explore and explain life's ups and downs and how we survive those. And then creative well-being involves engaging in activities in a purposeful way that stimulates something, that explores, exposes, and allows us to share that understanding with others. It's often through art and imagery that we get a deeper representation or an alternative representation to what we're very familiar with in our own cultures. And my goodness, we're still understanding the impact and the outcomes of COVID-19 and the pandemic and the social isolation and loneliness that escalated during those times of lockdown. And yet many people started to make bread, didn't they? They found solace and they found energy through bread making. And again, it's been found that the yeast and the movement of kneading interacts with our neurology and our physiology. So baking and creating and gardening has a similar physiological impact on us as well, as we're smelling and interacting with those microbes that we don't necessarily see or feel through the naked eye. Plus, we've got a climate anxiety that's causing a pandemic in our children and young people's ability to understand their place in the world and what they can do. So it's ever changing, isn't it? It's circular, and you'll see that a lot of my images have been that spiral circular representation of how we navigate life. So then I started thinking, well, where are we on the spectrum? How much knowledge do we have in terms of the evidence that engaging in heritage, culture, creativity improves or sustains our well-being? And I think for me, people are often on a spectrum. So at the university, I've got a lot of what we call hard scientists who are looking for cause and effect, are looking to understand the minutiae of what's happening when and how. And then we've got other end of the spectrum where we're investigating. We don't know. We're still exploring and unraveling the complexity of the world within which we live and work. So for me, that's where creativity helps me with tools, mechanisms, and activities that can bring very disparate groups of stakeholders together to achieve a common goal, and allowing everyone to have a voice represented, heard, listened to, and added to the pot. So for you as well, your experience of well-being, health, etc., will be somewhere on that spectrum in how you wish to understand. I remember when my father died, I got all the books out and I was reading everything about the grief, cycles of grief, models of grieving. And I thought, yep, I've got it. I know what's going to happen. But it didn't stop me feeling. So I was trying to intellectualize the grieving process, thinking, well, if I've read about it and I know this is coming next, I'm going into a bargaining phase, it would suppress my grieving. And one day I was driving home, I can't remember where I'd been, and I wanted to talk to my dad, and I was angry. And I had to allow that energy, that emotion to exhibit itself. So I couldn't suppress it through the science and the understanding and the intellectualizing. My body was having a physiological response to grief. So how do we allow that to happen? And creativity, journaling, yoga, meditation, mindfulness has all been helpful for me to allow myself to be who I am. And then there's a lovely quote here: understanding stability and change in human functioning refers to our motivational dynamics and well-being. So you will have motivational drivers that help you to seek out how you understand the world and how you want to connect and be with others. So embrace that. And then Green talks about being wide awake and how wide awakeness contributes to the creation of self. That's quite a philosophical statement, isn't it, to unpick? But I think what I'm saying is engage in all your senses. Allow yourself time and space to explore. And that to me is a creative space. And then O'Connor says, in a world that really doesn't always make sense, creativity can bring hope, helping us tackle that complexity and reimagine the world. I learned the other day that lionesses, when they're in their tribes, knock heads with each other, lick each other, say good morning, as it were. But actually what they're doing is not just connecting physically by just checking everyone's there, they're also assessing each other's physical ability to hunt. And they then decide as a pack who needs to stay at home and look after the cubs and who goes out, who's strong enough, who's well enough. And they take it in turns. That natural connecting, checking in with each other, negotiating. Okay, you want to come? Okay, well, then someone needs to stay. Mary's not well today. Should we leave her at home with the babes? Yep, let's do that. Come on then, let's go hunt. So the natural world heals us for free. There's been lots of research recently, hasn't there, about the contribution trees make to our health, well-being, and their ability to soak up carbon, but also how underground the fungal networks about where's water, here comes danger, look out, this is happening, send water down to the east coast, you know, it hasn't rained for months. All of this is happening, and we're only just beginning to find out the diversity and the richness of our natural world. And then I was thinking about the flooding that we have experienced all over the country and the horrendous images you see of drought and then flooding and the impact that that's having on agricultural, fishing, and those sorts of communities that live in the coastal rural areas. And then I found this document, Sea, Land and City, that says the riverbanks show that beavers help shape the ecosystem, support biodiversity, and use their famous dam building skills to protect us from the growing challenges of flooding and drought. And that engaging with nature is actually saving the economy 2 billion a year. And yet the beavers do that for us for free. Trees do their thing for us for free. And likewise, your bodies naturally restore themselves. So are we listening? Going back to my breathing exercise, do you listen and do you interact and connect with your own physiological and psychological well-being? Because the body will naturally restore. So then in the health research, what they found is that if you're in an environment that even just has a painting of nature on the wall, there was an experiment done in an intensive care unit where some patients were looking at a blank wall, some patients were looking at a picture or an image of nature. And those people that had an image of nature on the wall recovered 20% quicker than those who didn't have access even to a window or an image where they could see nature. There's been loads of studies that's looked at pain reduction, blood pressure reduction, and mood changes in patients who have nature around them during their recovery and rehabilitation. There's research to show that patient satisfaction improves and that people's sleep improves. And again, I don't know about you, but when we used to go to the beach as children, my goodness, I slept well that night because you'd been outside running around in and out the water. And it's the same. If I spend my 8 hours a day on the computer and then go straight to bed, I can't sleep. I'm awake at 2, 3 in the morning. My body doesn't feel it's been active or it's able to rest well. So research is now really interested in how to digitalize health. And there are some fascinating research projects underway at the moment with the use of those virtual reality headsets. So women in difficult labor are able to choose whether they're by the beach or whether they're in the woods while they're having severe contractions. And again, it's helped with pain reduction and smooth labor. Same with recovering from osteoporosis, osteo-related skeletal surgery that's very high pain for a lot of people, has enhanced recovery by having nature images available. So I talked about my grandmother and the naturopathic medicines. There's a resurgence of interest, isn't there, in how do we utilize what's around us and how does nature provide what we need? So natural remedies are beginning to be very much considered in terms of reducing the pharmaceutical bill. So again, many of you know North Norfolk has a most aging population in line with Japan. So by 2045, there's going to be more people living over the age of 75, 80 in North Norfolk than anywhere in the country. And alongside that is complex healthcare needs and a high pharmaceutical bill. So how do we address that in a way that's going to help people live longer and still reach their potential? Is it naturopathic medicines we need to consider? And like I said, with the bread making and getting your hands in soil and gardening brings us into contact with microbiomes that improves our immune system. So basically, and this is Thompson talking in 1914, nature heals. It speaks to our moral and intellectual ear, illuminating the importance of concern for others above concern for self. So as you might have guessed, I'm quite interested in the brain, and there are two organs in the body that we still know little about compared to other organs. One of them is the brain, and the second, the female womb. So neuroplasticity is a new field of neuroscience where we're recognizing that neuroconnections in the brain might be fractured, but can actually start to heal and reform. And so building your neuroplasticity is through trying something new, having new hobbies, trying a slightly different form of exercise, or trying a new activity. Neuroplasticity can be enhanced when you challenge yourself. There's, I'm going to forget his name now, a potter, Duval, and there's some lovely pots of his in the Sainsbury Centre. He does a repetition of his pots every day, and he says that that helps him. It's a meditative state, but it's also honing his craft. And he talks about how he challenges himself to create the same shape, size, width of a pot, one after the other, after the other, after the other. We know that engaging and connecting in cultural and social activities enhances our well-being. It helps with that interconnection and lack and addressing the isolation. And yet we know for some, you can still be smiling and interacting and engaging, but inside not addressing what you need. The prime example, isn't it, of the comedian, what was he called? Robin Williams, who was the Joker, the funny man, full of energy, and yet inside his depression killed him. To travel and explore new things. Again, research has shown that health professionals who have an overseas experience in other cultures, other organizations, improve their clinical decision making because they can see and they've witnessed alternate ways of doing things and experiencing things. So it gives them another neuro pathway to say, I think we can do this. Curiosity, I love that word. And when I first graduated from UEA, Philip Pullman was there, the writer, and he said, never underestimate the element of play. Keep playing, keep being curious, keep experimenting. And that, again, really helps with our brain well-being and health. We've talked a little bit about music, but also how movement is so important, that our bodies need to move. We need to be active. And I, again, fall foul of that by sitting at my desk for long periods of time. So I need to get up and move. Mental workouts, Sudokus, crosswords, puzzles, again, remaining curious can really help prevent the onslaught of things like dementia, Alzheimer's. So keeping your mind active. And then again, I've touched on mindfulness practices, the yoga, the journaling, the reflective conversations. I don't know about you, but I have a colleague that we have what's called co-supervision conversations, where we meet and we just talk about our work and we sort of support each other through a critical conversation. That for me is a nourishing, mindful exercise as we explore our work together. No judgment, just exploration and support. So what's your interconnectedness? Where do your circles start to align for you? And where and how do you find that harmony, the balance, the holistic approach to health, well-being that you need to sustain your ability to function and connect with those around you? So then I thought, okay, what does all this mean? What can I leave you with that might help you take some of this work forward? So I've come up with an acronym, the vital signs of well-being. Do your communities, do your connections share your vision and values? A lot of people work in organizations where they don't feel their vision and values match, and that is often where burnout and stress happens. Where and how are you influencing both yourself and others in sharing your knowledge, sharing your tips, and making a difference to the communities within which you function? T is for togetherness, that connectivity, those people that nurture you. Where are your lionesses coming in and banging your forehead and licking you to make sure that you're fit for the hunt? Attitude, positive mental attitude, and the here and now, being grateful, is a major shift for many people to think about. Actually, I've got so much to be grateful for. I've just completed a 3-day international conference in Sri Lanka, and the people of Sri Lanka are so grateful and yet have so little in comparison to the Western world in terms of mental health care in particular. Lifelong learning. I encourage my students, you're never an expert, you're always on the journey to expertise. There's always room to learn more and remain open to learn. And again, that's where art, creativity, heritage, culture comes in, because it's always surprising, isn't it? To make those connections. Ah, I didn't think about that. Oh, that's lovely. I see where that fits now. And I don't know about you, but I love the Who Do You Think You Are programs and those real aha moments people have in going, oh, I see now. That makes sense. I've often wondered. Our geography. Do we really engage with the environment that we become so familiar on a day-to-day basis? My son lives in London, and then every time I come back and start driving through the Norfolk lanes, I can literally feel myself go, oh, I'm home. I like London, and but I don't want to stay there. Nature, as I've said, nature heals, and it heals for free. So enjoy and engage with nature. And then the simplicity of being with and being within the cultures, the communities that we love. So back to that question, where and how do you make meaningful connections? Where and how do you engage your 5 senses in understanding your place in the world and connecting and enabling others to understand their health and well-being? And there's some references for those of you that want to look into this further. I could have done pages of references. There's so much out there. But thank you for listening, and let's now have a conversation.